So we're going to talk about domain and range again. Domain, once again, is the set of all x values for a given function. It's the x values, right? Domain, I'm going to say this, alphabetically, domain and x go together, and then range and y go together alphabetically, okay? So that's how I kind of think about it. And range is the set of all y values, so range and y go together, domain and x go together, because alphabetically they go together. So I hope that helps a little bit in remembering which goes with which. Make sure you're asking questions, you guys. I know you hate asking questions, and I know that you don't like math that much, but some of you are pretty good at it. Even if, I gotta pause this. Sorry. Okay. So domain and range, we talked about that. So this is a different teacher doing this. I'm just going to kind of read through her slides and we'll talk about them a little bit. Please ask questions. So I hit the wrong button. Sorry. Domain is my x value. So if I'm given a set of points, -2, 3, -3, -1, -4, 0, -5, 1, -6, 2, -7. What is the domain of this set of points? Domain is my x value. So if I have a set of points, I'm just going to look at the x values, which in this case is -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And so I write that down. This you guys were pretty good at. If I'm just given a set of points, I can find my x values, not a problem, right? Here's my x values. You guys are pretty good at that. The thing that you were not good at was this right here. I have to use the right notation too. So I have to use this part also. So most of you were good. You were putting in your order and you were doing them in order. You were doing them in order from least to greatest. That was awesome. You were just forgetting the brackets on the end. Okay, and they're the little curly Q brackets. Okay, so and that's for discrete information or discrete function, which means we don't know if it's or connected. The points are connected or not. So here's the next one. Range is my same set of points. Range is my y values. Again, you guys did really well. If I gave you a set or a table or a mapping or anything that wasn't a graph, you guys did really well, except for the little curly Q brackets on the end. Are we okay with that? Everyone understand? X and Y. You guys are pretty good at that part. Okay. So we have a graph. So look at the line, graph of this line. Are there any x values? So the question is, are there any x values that are not points on this graph? Any x values at all? So this was kind of hard to look at, and Alex can kind of look at it and see it. He already put an answer in the checkbox. He said no. But what I really liked about this teacher's presentation is the next slide. And look what she did. She highlighted the x-axis and then she drew arrows. And if this needs to have this on the end of it, sorry. Ooh. If this continued, both here, 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 and here, would the big red arrows keep continuing? Yes, they would. They would keep continuing. So is there any number, any x value that is not part of this graph? Well, no, there isn't, because this would keep, these red arrows would keep continuing this way. So there's no x value, and if I could draw some littler ones in here, there'd be some littler ones in here, right? So there's no x value. So the domain is the set of all real numbers, all of them. It's every real number, and is everyone okay with that? I kind of like that visual to see it. I can see it this way. It's every single x number it is. X value it is, sorry. I'm going from left to right. I'm going from here to here. This direction, left to right, okay? I sure can. And Zoe, I'm gonna post this video too, so you'll have this if you want to just listen to this part for this. Okay. Does that make sense? So I will post this video so you can go through and do it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then she kind of spelled it out here. To find the domain of the graph, look at the x-axis from left to right. So remember, The width of the graph is from negative infinity to positive infinity. The graph begins at negative infinity and ends at positive infinity. So the domain is from negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay, questions? Is everyone okay with that? Does that make sense? Hope you're paying attention because you're going to do this, and we're going to do some problems like this in a few moments.
Can you go back so I can write down?
Okay, so are we good with this page, Zoe? Do you need to write this down? Or you just...
I got it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the range. Same graph, right? It's the same graph. It says, are there any y values that are not used in this point? So instead of looking at the x, this time we're looking at the y values, which is this way, right? So vertically. So again, this was okay because we've already looked at pictures like this and you guys have struggled with it. And then I saw this and I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense. Again, we have the arrows. Look, my y values are as my y-axis. And again, I can draw more arrows in here, right? And if it kept continuing, because this graph continues, I could keep drawing in more arrows and more arrows and more arrows. So the range, again, is the set of all real numbers for this graph. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Is the picture kind of a little more, for me, it was a little more visual. And I think a lot of you are more visual learners, so I think this was a little better. It stopped recording. That was nice. Okay, sorry. So you guys are more visual learners, so I thought this might help out a little bit for some of you guys. So range is always from bottom to top. So I want you guys to realize it's from bottom to top always, okay? So if it says, to find the range of the graph, look at the y-axis from bottom to top. Go back here from bottom to top. Negative infinity, not a real number, is the smallest y value on the graph. The height of the graph grows to positive infinity. Again, not a real number because we don't know what infinity is. So the range, again, is from negative infinity to positive infinity. And range is from bottom to top. Okay? Questions on that so far? Everyone's okay? Awesome. Okay. So now let's look at a different graph. So we still have a graph. They still have arrows on the end. You guys, a lot of graphs, you can't put arrows on the end. So unless they have like a solid dot, we're just going to assume they have an arrow on the end. Are we okay with that? Let's just put that assumption out there for us right now, that unless they have a solid dot on the end or an open dot, some sort of dot on the end, we're going to assume they have arrows. Okay. So this is my new graph. So again, are there any x values that are not points on the graph? So if I look at these arrows right here, that kind of implies that my graph is still going, although that's probably not that far, but it's still getting wider and wider, right? So eventually, and how long is it going to go on like that? So that's my question. Those kind of questions I want to ask myself. But again, this teacher decided to do it visually a different way, which I really like. Here's my x-axis, and because this goes on forever and ever, I could keep drawing these arrows in. I could keep drawing these arrows in forever and ever, right? So is there any x value that this graph is not going to touch? That's the question for this. What do you guys think? Is there any x values that this is not going to touch? Or am I going to be able to use all x values? There is some x values it's not going to touch. There isn't, because this graph will keep getting wider and wider. It's not getting wider very fast. Let me say this. It's not getting wide very fast, but it is getting wide every time. It's getting wider and wider and wider. It's just getting taller faster than it's getting wider. Is that okay? Yeah, it is. Okay, so my domain is all real numbers again. Because the arrows, you can definitely see they're pointing outwards like this. So it's going to keep getting wider. It's just going to take a while to get there. So again, find the domain of the graph. Is left to right. The width of the graph is from negative infinity to positive infinity. It's the same thing. It says the same thing. The graph begins at negative infinity and ends at positive infinity. So parenthesis, negative infinity to positive infinity. And those are parentheses, not brackets. Questions on that? Okay. So the range is going to be a little different. So are there any y values that are not used in the points on the graph of this parabola? So think about that. Are there any y values that are not used in this graph? Well, yeah, there are, because it doesn't go, look down here. Is the graph down here in this y area down here? No, it's not. So look at the visual she did. So my y's are only in here. It doesn't go below the x-axis, the y-axis, sorry, it doesn't go below the x-axis. None of the negative numbers on the y-axis are used, right? None of these are used. So the range is a set of all positive real numbers and 0. So 0 is included because it touches 0. It touches the y-axis and it's included. Oh, Esta must be getting kicked out. Okay? So go back a little bit. So it goes from here up. Here's my lowest. And then it's going up. So because I'm on infinity here, right? So my lowest is 0 and my highest is infinity. So this time my range is going to be a little different. Again, it goes from bottom to top. So I'm going from 0 bracketed to infinity parenthesis. Yeah, I figured, Esta, you're good. Maria. Okay. Okay, is everyone okay with that? So now that's kind of what the teacher talked about. We're going to practice now, and we have practicing again like everything that we've practiced up until now, because I didn't want to not practice the points and the mapping diagrams and the tables and have you forget those before we have a checkpoint on it. Oops. So we're going to practice this. We want to find the domain and range. And can I go to the next page just for... So I guess we'll do the points first. We'll do number 1 first. And you guys are going to put the answers in the chat box. Okay. I'm going to do the first one, and then we'll go to the other points. They're kind of mixed on the pages, so we'll skip back and forth on the pages. I hope that you're okay with that. So for number 1, for a set of points, the domain, I want to find my domain and I want to find my range. And who can tell me what's my domain? What is domain again? Which values are the domain? Everyone type that into the chat box. I want everyone to type it. All 10 of you should have an answer in there. Which value? Don't tell me the numbers, just tell me, is it the X or the Y values are domain? Nice, Yale. Good job. Nice, Esta. You have a 50-50 chance. It's either the X or the Y. Good, Zoe. Yes, range is Y. Nice. Okay, so if I said range is Y, you should know what domain is. Everyone should be typing it in right now. Roberto, Johnny, Ketland, Alex. Who else is in here? Jasmine, 2 Jasmines. Ramses. Good. Okay. So domain is my X values. Okay. So in my set of points, which one is X? So if I have a set of points, here's my set of points, right? Right here. This is my set of points. Which one of those, the first one or the second one, that's what I want you to put, first or second, which one is the X value? The first or the second? Yeah, good. You can actually put the number too if you want to tell me. First, good, yeah. Yep. Good, yes. Okay. Okay, so right. So my domain, you guys are good. So you've got this. I think it's the graphs that you have problems with, not these ones, right? So my domain is this one, and this one, right? And make sure we remember, what did they say? It's always in order. Let me write this down. In order, sorry, from least to greatest. Okay, remember, so it's always in order from least to greatest. So my smallest one is, and remember, I have to use the right notation. So I have to use these little curly Q things. It's -10, -9, and -7. Okay, so there's my domain. And then my range is the Y values, which are here, here, and there. Again, in order from least to greatest. So we've got 2, 6, and 10 with my brackets around them. Okay? Are we okay with that? Oh, Olivia's here now. Okay, so now I want, those are mapping diagrams. Back to this one now. And we're gonna do the mapping diagrams. Remember, these are called mapping diagrams. And the first one is always my X value, and the second one is always my Y value. Or whichever one the arrows are going to is my Y value. Okay? So again, we're going to find domain and range. Domain and range. So my definition of domain and range never changes. Domain, no matter what the function looks like, if it's a set of points, if it's a mapping diagram, if it's a table, if it's a, what am I missing? Graph. If it's an equation, we're going to get to those eventually. It doesn't change. My domain is always my X's. My range is always my Y's. Is that okay? So the definition of domain doesn't change no matter what type of function I'm looking at. Okay, so my domain on this is my X values from least to greatest. So here's my, oops, not eraser, here we go. Here's my X values. Everything in here is my X values, and that's my domain. So my domain, with the little curly Q brackets, are -8 and -3. And that's it. My range is everything that's in the Y's. Ooh! And let's try that again. Everything that's in the Y's. It's 1, 3, and 5. Okay? Does that make sense? Are we okay? Are you guys ready to try it on your own? I know that you did okay on this yesterday. So we've got 2 of them here for you to do. Please make sure you're using the correct brackets. It's the curly Q ones. And then, and you're doing them in order from least to greatest. So there you go. So we're going to go ahead and do the domain. The domain for this is -1, 4, and 6. And I'm just going to go ahead and do the domain here since I've got the purple out. -1, -4, and 6. And then the range for this one would be 1 and 7. And the range for this one would be 1, and 5. Nice job, you guys. Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to go to, sorry. Okay, I think we have some ordered pair. Here we go. 6 and 7. If you'll do 6 and 7, find the domain and range for both 6 and 7. Go on and do this because we don't have all day. So my domain is going to be -9, -1, and 0. And my range is going to be 6 and 10. Remember, it's always in order from least to greatest. So my domain is 0. Wow. And my range is 4, 6, 8. Okay, questions? We feel that's okay. Don't worry about it. I just want to make sure that you get it right. So when you do this on the checkpoint, you know, correct? Okay. I totally lost my train of thought. I am so sorry. Okay, so how do we feel? Let me put up your pictures here, all of you guys. And you can all do a thumbs up or a, how many people are in here? 12? Okay, you can do a thumbs up or a picture or whatever, however response you want. How do you feel about finding, let's make sure we word this pretty clearly. How many of you feel good about finding the domain and range from a set of points? Go ahead and put a thumbs up or a, yeah, do a thumbs up. Let's do a thumbs up. If you don't feel good about it, put something else. So there's only 3 people that responded. Does that mean the rest of you don't feel good about doing it? Okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay if you get it, but you don't get it at the same time. Because you know what? When we do the next 2, it's the same as with a set of points. So we're still going to go over it. The most important thing is that you realize that my domain is my X values and my range is my Y values, and remember that part. Does that make sense? And thank you for putting something in the chat so I don't feel like I'm talking to myself. I really, really appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to tables. And I think we only have a couple examples of tables. But it's the same thing as what we just got done doing, right? We know my X's. We know X's domain by now, right? And we know that we do them in order from smallest to largest. So here would be my, oops. Let's put it in the right color here that we've been talking about, domain. Is it time for the day to be over, you guys? I so wish. Here's my domain, and here is my range, right? It's pretty simple. Here's Y, and here is X. So this is domain, this is range, right? So my domain, if I had to write it out, which I do, in order from least to greatest is -2, -5. I only have to write the -5 one time, remember? -5 and 6. And then my range is, what is my range? What is my range? -9, -8, -7, and 0. Okay? Questions on tables? I guess I should have asked first how you felt about mapping diagrams. I'm sorry, but almost all of you were actually putting in answers. So good job. So go to number 8 and do the domain and range for number 8. Okay, so I'm going to do this one. Now, we are going to do the hardest one next. I'm just going to tell you. So these ones are the easiest ones, right? So -2, -5, -9, and 6. Range 1, -8, and 10. Okay? No, you're doing great. You're doing great on this. Okay? All right. So easiest part. This is the easiest part because they list out all the pieces for you. Great. And you guys yesterday did great on this part too. And I just wanted to review it so you don't forget it. Just so you guys know. We're going to keep reviewing domain and range. And by the way, when we get into secondary 2, guess what we're going to talk about again? Domain and range. And when you do secondary 3, guess what you're going to talk about again? Domain and range. You talk about domain and range. So I would keep my notes or whatever you guys have. I would just keep them because you will talk about this again and again and again. Okay? All right. So here we go. This to me is the hardest part, is from a graph, because you guys struggle from a graph. So I think we have a couple pages worth. So we are just going to talk about it. And we're going to talk about how sorry, I have a pen out, sorry. We're going to talk about a couple different ways you can do this. So I saw a couple different ways that different people did it. And for me, just to look at it and I just draw a line, it doesn't always work for you guys. So the teacher that I just showed you all the slides on, and she kind of drew pictures in it. That worked. That if you're a visual learner, that works really well. Another way I saw is somebody took, and I'm still going to use purple for domain and pink for range because it kind of helps out a little bit, right? I'm just going to kind of draw a box around my my graph, and here's my domain, right? My domain is going to go from left to right, and it goes from here to here. Okay, there's my furthest to the left and furthest to the right, and then my lowest is here, and my highest is here. So I saw somebody do this too, and that may help. So my domain is left to right. So my domain here is my furthest to the left is -8. And here is when we have to start, and this is where I think part of the problem comes in, is when we have to start talking about the different types of bracketing that we need to use. Okay, so remember, if it's included or it's solid, right, I use the brackets that are left to the right side of the P. Okay, if it's not included, which means it's like open, like an open dot, like there's a hole or there's a hole in the graph there. I'm going to use parentheses. Okay, and then the last one I want to talk about is infinity. If it has arrows on the end, if I'm using negative infinity or infinity, so if my graph has arrows, then I'm going to use the parentheses because we don't know where infinity and negative infinity is. Does that kind of make sense? I'm trying to shortcut it down so it's not so complicated, and maybe I'm cutting it down too much. So I just want to make sure that you guys are understanding this concept. If not, please let me know. Okay? So if I go back to my circle graph that I have, they're solid. There's no holes in my graph, which means I'm going to use the brackets. Okay? So I have to use the brackets. I have to say if it's included or not included. And it's from -8 to 2. And the only reason I can use this interval notation, where do I want to write this at? Interval, I'm going to call it interval. Is because this is a solid circle. The points are connected. The points are connected. Okay, it's continuous, or it's continuous. And I totally spelled continuous wrong. Let me see if I can spell it right. Continuous. I think that's it. Continuous. Okay, so it's a continuous graph, right? Which means I can put my pencil on the graph and draw the whole graph without lifting my pencil from the page. Or also it means like between 1 and 2, there's an infinite number of points between 1 and 2. So like between here and here, there's an infinite number of points between there. Do you guys understand what I mean when I say there's an infinite number of points between 1 and 2? Because there's 1.00000000000, as many zeros as you want, 1, and then 1.000000002. Does that make sense? So there's tons of points just in between there. There's infinite amount of numbers between 1 and 2. There's an infinite amount of numbers between 0 and 1. There's an infinite number of numbers between 0 and -1. So all those, it means it's continuous. I have all those points. As long as I'm talking about this, I want to kind of go down to this graph. This graph, however, is not continuous. This is what's called discrete, because the only points that count are this one, are the points that are how do I want to say this? Are the points that are just the points, because the points are not connected. There we go. Because the points are not connected. So like between -5 and -6 here, right between here and here, there's nothing in between there. I only want -5 and I only want -6. There's not that infinite number between there. Therefore, that's discrete. It's not continuous. Does that kind of make sense as far as that? So that's when wrong eraser. That's when I use the set notation, which is the brackets, which what we just got done using for the ordered pairs and the tables and the mappings. That's what I use for that. Okay, if it's discrete, I use that. Okay, so if it's a continuous graph, which most graphs are continuous, I want to say like 95% of the graphs you're going to get are going to be continuous. Probably 98% of the graphs you're going to get is continuous. So I'm going to use this notation up here for most of my graphs right here. I'm going to use this. So, and it's probably the harder I think this is probably the hardest concept right here to learn, is this part. Okay? So range. Oh. Let's try this again. Range. Range is from my lowest to my highest. So what's my lowest value? What is my lowest value? Is that -6? And my highest value is 4. And again, it's solid. There's no open holes, so that's so it's included. Okay? We're going to go over a few of these together, and then I will let you guys do the second page by yourselves. Okay? So let's go to number 10. Again, I'm going to draw in my rectangle, but luckily my rectangle is my graph, right? So I have from here, oops. Oh, you can't really see the purple on the black, but from here to here. And then my lowest is here to here. Okay? So my domain. And they're solid. There's no holes in them. So that means everything is included. So my domain is, my smallest domain is, what is my smallest domain? -7. And my biggest x, or you can think domain, but I can think x also. My smallest x is -7, and my biggest x is 8. And since there's no open holes, it's going to be all included. And then we have my range. My lowest, my lowest y value is -5. And my highest y value is 2. And again, everything's solid, so it's all included. Please make sure you're asking questions as we go through this. Okay. Here's my biggest, here's my smallest, here's my lowest, oof, and here's my tallest. So I just drew a rectangle around my graph so I can find my domain and my range. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I can. Of course I can. Is this 10? Is that where you need me to be? You're welcome. Remember, I also post these, all these notes will be posted in the Canvas page, and the recording will be posted there too. So no, don't be sorry ever that you need me to go back. I will always go back for you guys, okay? So don't ever be sorry about that. Okay. So my domain again. Sorry. My domain, my smallest, my furthest to the left. So my domain furthest to the left is, it looks like -3. And look, it's a solid dot here. Here's solid, so it's included. And my furthest to the right is, sorry, I just can't see anything today either, is 8. And it's solid, so it's also included. Okay, so my range. My lowest range is 1. And look, it is open, so it's a parenthesis. And my highest range is, it looks like 2, and it's solid again, solid dot, so it is closed, included. Questions? How did I get 8? So, isn't this 8? Right here? It's almost to, I'm just going to say, it's almost to 8, and I think that they meant to go hit the 8 bar right here. If I erase this, let me erase this so you can kind of see. Oh, sorry. It's not quite on 8. Do you see that? But it's almost there. Do you see that? It's close to 8 for the domain. It's the furthest to the left, so it should have probably hit 8 when they did it. I'm just gonna say it did. Okay, does that make sense, Esther? So this my graph goes to the 8. It's the furthest that my graph goes to this way. I don't know. Does that make sense? It could have probably been 7.9 maybe, but I bet that they just didn't stretch it out far enough. Because or when they took a picture of it, it was just a little bit off. Sometimes things move a little bit, so making graphs like this is kind of hard. Sometimes. Are you sure you're okay with that? Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the one we've kind of talked about already. We're going to do this as set notation. So that means I have to write down all of the x's. So that means I have to write down all of the x's. So I'm just going to mark them here. X, 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 and X. There's 4 of them. So my domain, this is just like if I had an ordered pair or a table or a mapping diagram. I'm only writing the x values down, which happens to be -6, -5, -2, and 0. And then my range, I'm going to do the same thing, only I'm going to go this way. So there's my ranges that I'm going to write down. And it's in order because I marked them up. So I marked them on the number line so I can go from order pretty easily. -3, 0, 5, 7. Questions on that one? You're not going to get many discrete graphs, just so you know. Okay, you guys are quiet now. All right. Lovely, this is a good one. Okay, so we've got a graph. And we've got arrows kind of on the end. Okay. So I always look for arrows first. Oh, I'm so glad you kind of get it. Yeah, it's the bracketing, right? That's kind of confusing on it. So if I have, can I make this smaller? You guys are like, sure, Miss Campbell. If I don't, look, my top 3 graphs have no arrows on it, so I boxed in I made a box, right, around it. They don't have arrows. I can make a box. I can box it in, and I can say, oh, this is my domain, this is my range. And the whole thing about if it's a bracket or a parenthesis is if on my graph it has an open circle, so I'll show this one here. If it has an open circle, and it's my lowest or my highest point, or my furthest to the left or my furthest to the right point, then I'm going to use a parenthesis there. If it's a solid point, I don't want to say that. I want to say this. If it's the furthest to the left, furthest to the right, lowest or highest, I'm going to use a parenthesis. If it's not any of those, I'm always going to use a bracket. That's the easiest way to put it. The only time, or if it's an arrow, okay, I'm going to use a parenthesis. So this means if I have an open point, this, are you okay with that? I have an open point. It's a hole. It's a hole in my graph, basically. It's a hole. I'm going to use a parenthesis. But it has to be furthest to the left, furthest to the right, highest or lowest. Like in this case, there's a hole here, but if I go up on this line, it's solid here, which means it's continuous. It's actually included at that. I have a y value at that x value, so I'm okay there. But my lowest point, if I'm looking here, I don't have a y value. There's no y equals 1 because it's not included. Y equals -1. I'm so sorry. And I don't know why I put 1 when it should be -1. Oh my Lanta. Okay. Okay. That's kind of how I think about it, is if there's an open hole, it's almost always there's going to be a parenthesis. Or if there's an arrow, I'm going to use a parenthesis. Every other time, it's going to be the bracket. And that's kind of what I think about it. I don't know if that helps you or not, because it really is, for me, I guess. I don't know if it's not just me or if it's other teachers too. That's why I always try and find what other teachers do, like today when there was that picture. That was a great picture earlier. And we can use that picture on here. For my x's, is there any x, if I did this, is there any x that's not going to be used? Well, no, there's not. Every single x is going to be used in this. So that means my domain is going to be from negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay? And I can do the same with my range, and that's my y. So I can draw my arrows this way. Is there any y that's not going to be used? It's getting smaller. I mean, is there any y that's not going to be used? No. I mean, it's starting to go smaller down this way, down. Oh. Sometimes I hate that you can't see my hands and you can't see me pointing on the board and stuff, because sometimes that's important in things like this. It's not going down faster, but it is going down. It's just going down really, really, really slowly, and eventually it's going to get down to infinity. It's just, why is this so small? It's just going to take a long time to get there. Is that okay? Yeah, because it has an infinite amount of time to get there. So it's still going to negative infinity to infinity, because there's no y's that it's not going to reach. Okay? Kind of strange. But I kind of like that visual that she gave me, and it really kind of, I hope it helps you. I can draw a picture like that. Like the ones above that we did that didn't have any arrows on it, I could draw a rectangle around it. It was awesome. I knew where my boundaries were. Boom, done. With the arrows, it's a little harder. I can't draw a rectangle around something that doesn't ever end in any direction, so it makes it harder. So let's look at the last one. Oh, I have an arrow on one end and a solid dot on the other. So I'm going to look and see what I can do. My domain is one number on this, because it's a straight line. My domain is, what is my domain? That looks like -3. And I don't know why I used curly cues on that. That was so not right. Let me erase that. My domain is bracket -3. It's all included. -3 is included no matter what. Okay? Now my range. And I think sometimes this is hard to understand too. Remember my range, because my arrow's pointing downwards, but I'm always doing my range from the bottom to the top, from my lowest, which happens to be negative infinity, to my highest point, which is, what is that number? 9? Well, infinity is not included, but 9 has a solid point up here. It stops at 9. Done. Okay, done. All right, now I want you guys, how are we doing on time, you guys? We are almost out of time, I think. Well, we've got enough time for you guys to try a few of these, okay? So I want you guys to try a few graphs. A couple pages worth, yeah, we have. Okay, so I want you to try, let's do 15 and 16 first. Okay, I still want to kind of go over these two problems. So the first one has no arrows. So what I want to do for me is I'm going to draw my little rectangle, which I can do. Right, so my domain, I'm doing that way. My range is here. Okay, so domain. My furthest to the left is -8. And my furthest to the right is, it looks like 3. And then I want to talk about this. This is an open circle. So that means it's open here. And this is a closed circle, which means it's closed here. And then my range, my lowest number looks like it's -6. And again, it's still open at the open. It's still an open circle here. So it's a parenthesis. And then my highest, it looks like 8, and it's still closed up here, so it's still a bracket. And that's my domain and range. Okay, and then here I have an arrow. So you can think, is there any x values that aren't used? Well, here's my x. I can only go from here over, and then here, oops, didn't mean to draw that one, sorry. The arrow goes on and on and on. There. So my domain for this one, and I do not know why all of a sudden I'm spelling out the word domain and highlighting it and whatever else that's going on today. My domain is going to be from furthest to the left is negative infinity because it's got the arrow right there, to the furthest to the right is 6, and it's got a solid point on the end, so it is included. And then my range, here we go. And then what y's cannot be included should be my answer, my question to myself. And this is an arrow and it keeps going. So my smallest range is -7. And it's going to go towards infinity, which is not included. Okay? Questions? And I know that we didn't finish all this, but I know it was mostly just review to make sure that you understood the graphs. And I hope you understand the graphs a little bit better because we're going to keep working on it. So no matter what we're doing on the key features, when we have a whole bunch more to talk about, we'll keep talking about domain and range and domain and range and domain and range, because most of the rest of the stuff is just with graphs, okay? So